Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all. My name is Cynthia Luck-Carr, and I'm your practitioner this morning. So before I start, I don't want to make a special announcement that next Sunday we're going to have our first ever Practitioner-Led Sunday. So Reverend John's going to be away, and Sarah and Marsha Mode-Stavros and Alex Taylor and I will be leading a special service, so stay tuned. We're excitedly planning that right now. And let's go ahead and start our sacred time together with an invocation. So I invite you to settle in, take a few breaths, ground into your space. Gathering here in this sacred place, I recognize the powerful presence of the divine, the creative force that is the source of all that is. I know that God is right here in perfect form, as this crisp, beautiful day, as the inspiring messages and music, as individualizing as each and every one of us. And it is from this grace-filled place that I give thanks for Reverend John and our practitioner team, our talented musicians, our past and present leadership council members, our children's program teachers and our live stream technicians, and all those who help keep the center full of vitality. I am grateful for this opportunity as I bless this time together with deep gratitude. Together we say, and so it is. Okay, so typically, the week before I'm a practitioner, some kind of theme arises and I go with it and I look something up and find a reading that matches. But this week, all I could think of was that I was tired. The only thing that kept coming up was being tired. And so I thought, maybe that means I need to look up rest. I need to rest. And it turns out that the interwebs say that there are 7 types of rest. I didn't even know this. As a health coach, you'd think I'd know this. But I thought that was interesting how we always have to quantify and, section out things as humans. But I know that I need rest. And so I invite you to celebrate and honor rest with me today. It turns out I also found out, ironically, after I chose this, that the Winter Feast for the Soul started this weekend. And those of you who have been here a while remember back when our very own, formerly our very own, she's now in Florida, Valerie Sconey started the Winter Feast right here. And now it's this international phenomenon of supported meditation for 40 days, starting, I think, Friday. So winterfeastforthesoul.com if you're interested. So I'm going to do it this year for the first time in a while, and rest every day for a few moments at least, if not 40 minutes, for 40 days. So I'll check back in with you and let you know how that went. But join me if you'd like. So my topic, I decided to look up in this book. A lot of my spiritual books don't really have rest as a topic. But this book is called Consolations, and it is an essay on different words, all different words, and of course, rest is in here. So as I read this to you, I invite you to contemplate your breath and get in a restful position. And then when I'm finished, I'd like to sit for a minute, maybe, in silent contemplation with you. Okay? So, rest. And actually, I'm not going to read exactly. I'm taking pieces of it. So you'll have to check it out if you want to see the whole thing. To rest is to fall back literally or figuratively from outer targets and shift the goal not to imaginative states of perfect stillness, but to an inner state of natural exchange. The template of natural exchange is the breath, the autonomic giving and receiving that forms the basis and the measure of life itself. In the first state of rest is the sense of stopping, the giving up on what we have been doing or how we have been being. In the second is the sense of slowly coming home, the physical journey into the body's uncoerced, unbullied self, as if trying to remember the way or even the destination itself. In the third state is a sense of healing and self-forgiving and of arrival. In the fourth state, deep in the primal exchange of the breath, is the give and the take, the blessing and the being blessed, and the ability to delight in both. The fifth stage is a sense of absolute readiness and presence, a delight in and an anticipation of the world and all its forms. So take that with me for a minute of silent contemplation. And as we complete this minute, recognizing that the divine is with us as you and as me, we'll read together our affirmation for this month, for this week. It's in the middle part of your announcements in red. Together, I release the old and embrace the new as I set intentions based in wholeness, love, and great joy, and allowing space between.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody at home. So I call them the pajama brigade. Someone just telling me this week, he says, I just love just being home in my pajamas and watching you all now. He says, I don't know if I could ever go back to coming in person. It's too comfortable. So here we are, and I think this is a good time to actually say Happy New Year. You think, isn't it over? Well, the weird stuff about New Year's is over. You know, I think this is the time that we realize that not only are there some great opportunities that we can take, but there's some unexpected challenges, and where we might get a little more grounded and say, well, it's time for another year and another set. So I attended the School of Ministry from 1997 to 2000. And the Center for Spiritual Living we have our own School of Ministry, and it's an accredited master's program. And when I went, they had just completely revamped the program. And my entering class, were the guinea pigs. And there were some great things that came out of it, and some, I think they changed. Because, well, you try things out. But they did something that was really earth-shattering at the time. A third of the program was distance learning. Now, we think today, well, so what? You know, there's Zoom, there's all sorts of things. There was no Zoom. There were not smartphones. In fact, I think I got my first cell phone, like 2001 or something. They were basically kind of like, you know, the Charlie Angels ones, you know, you remember that far back? So this is how we did distance learning. So each class were 10 one-hour lectures, and they shipped us for each of these classes, there was 20 of them, a big old thing with 10 cassette tapes for each larger class. So you had this huge, like, amassed sort of thing here, and we did have personal contact with the instructors, that we would have a couple group phone calls and times that you could call them and connect a bit, but it was really interesting that they were on cassette tapes. And here's two things that don't seem to make sense. I passed the courses with flying colors, and I don't think I ever got to the other side of the tape without falling asleep. So sleep learning does work. I proved it, that it does work. But anyways, so with all those classes, I honestly don't remember much of the material because it was a while ago. But there's one instructor story who has stayed with me, and it actually fits into the larger topic of last week and this week. So one of my instructors, he was an American and a Buddhist, and he was, this does actually has something to do with it, just kind of your basic white guy. And at the time, he was kind of mid-40s, but he had for many years been a Buddhist monk. And he had been part of the Dalai Lama's entourage as an interpreter. And I thought, well, that's so interesting. And he just gave us some little snippets of his story, just enough to think, well, how did that happen? So he went from being a Buddhist monk to, I think, more of a monk undercover kind of thing. And again, he was kind of mid-40s, and he was enamored with his motorcycle, and he got married. And somehow I had, these two images in my mind of how did this happen? So I had met him like once, I think, in person, and just, again, basic white guy that likes motorcycles, and trying to envision him in the saffron robes with, shaved head kind of thing. But the more he told of his story, it made sense of sorts. But what I found so interesting, and the reason why that I think his story stuck with me, he spoke a bit about the type of spiritual practice he had as a Buddhist monk, and I'm assuming he continued. And it's a type of spiritual practice that I think sometimes those of us that always feel like we're lagging behind in that department, it sounds like, I don't know, kind of your dream spiritual practice kind of thing. And he would go into states, what he would call samadhi, and I don't know if you know much about that, that basically it is a state where your consciousness literally leaves your body. And he said that, so in many Eastern philosophies, and the philosophy we teach here, we teach the concept of oneness, that we are connected with all things and all times, even though we wonder how that can be as human beings. But he said when you're in that state, you actually are experiencing it and living it, that it just is. And so that's, in a sense, draws you into that state because you are literally feeling the oneness with the universe. But it seems like, in what little snippets of the story that he told, that he felt that it was time to see the oneness in a more secular kind of life. And so, like I said, he discovered motorcycles and got married and all those sort of things and continued to be a teacher in Buddhism. But what affected me was that so often many of us, we hold up that kind of Buddhist monk lifestyle as the ultimate, and yet he decided the best path was to choose to see the presence of the divine in the mundane, in the everyday. That so often we say that we have a spiritual life and then we have our other life. Or we say in a spiritual practice, I need to set time for prayer and spiritual practice, without realizing that everything is spiritual practice, that there isn't a separation. And so I was just really intrigued about that journey of his, and how that his experience of the infinite, how he was bringing that into what we think of as the finite. And that spiritual practice actually is allowing us to see the infinite in what appears to be limited. And the reason why I'm sharing that with you is that last week and this week we're talking or exploring how we teach the process of prayer at Light of the Mountains Center of Spiritual Living. That we don't think of it so much as putting in your order and hoping to get something, that it is more of a changing and shifting of our own consciousness. And in doing that, we can become more receptive to a life that makes more sense. That if we elevate our consciousness, that what we need most will have a way of coming into our lives. And last week, talking about what we call spiritual mind treatment or affirmative prayer, that there's actually what we call, it's a very linear kind of thing, which is odd. But there are what I call 5 invitations to change your consciousness. And we talked a little bit about the first couple, which is basically what happens in samadhi. It's entertaining the idea and affirming that the divine is everywhere, in all things. That even if you are in a point in your life that you're troubled or just really challenged with something, to first start there. The divine is in everything. And then moving from there to contemplate, and again, this is a little review from last week, what part of that divine in everything would you like to have a better experience of, or more of an experience of? And again, keeping away so much from, I have to do this, or I have to get a certain type of job, or I have to have a certain whatever, to go to what is at the depth of the experience that I'm looking for right now. And last week I shared that something big for me, especially in these last 2 years, is just the spiritual practice and concept of just peace. And my feeling that if I could feel at some point at peace, I could be okay with what has been happening for the last couple of years. So I don't have to outline how things have to progress in COVID, but if I could have a bigger sense of peace, that my prayer, in a sense, would be answered, and that my consciousness would be shifted to a certain point. So that's kind of reviewing where we were last week. But there's a couple more things that are really important when we take something to prayer. And again, think about it differently. So this is how my view of prayer is too. It is I'm giving the universe permission to, in a sense, mess with me a little bit. It is saying that I am willing to change. I'm willing to see something differently. I'm willing to grow in consciousness and possibly give up something that in my human ego I had made pretty precious. So it's saying, okay, go at it. Have at it here. Just put some of these experiences into my life, into my experience. But there are two really big things in this process for us to be open to talk about today. The first is gratitude, and the second is letting go, and what does that actually mean? So I know many of us have a practice of gratitude at some level, but there's levels of gratitude. So a beginning practice would be to just acknowledge the great things that are in your life in spite of the not so great things in your life. That some people will practice is, say, counting their blessings, what good happened today. But for me, the deeper practice of gratitude is even taking a larger view of this. As I wrote in my blog this week, that in spite of tremendous challenges that we have all had in our lives, some really big that we probably thought in the moment that we couldn't make it through, and some just the annoyances that happen every day, that we made it here. In spite of what has gone on in your life, in spite of what is going on in your life, in spite of the world seemingly going mad these last 2 years, we were able to get up out of the bed today and choose to come here. I think that's pretty miraculous on some levels, don't you? That we have that choice, and our life on some level to acknowledge that it has worked on some level. And so I look at that, especially when I'm faced with a new challenge, and think that this might be the one to do me in. This might be the one that I won't recover from. This is the one that the sky will start to fall. And I just go to gratitude and even trust to realize the evidence is to the contrary. And the thing about staying in gratitude at that level, it opens you up to the possibility that solutions can happen. That in your moment, that it might be difficult, you can look back and say, I made it before and I can make it again. That it leads us to a sense of trust But a trust not thinking that things will always turn out exactly how we want them, but that there's a larger connection that we have, that we're part of something larger, and that we can trust that it will unfold in the way that it should. Sometimes we humanly will like it, sometimes we won't. So I take a lot of solace, especially with what is going on in the world today, in our center and in my life, that it will have a way of working out, because it actually has before. And again, just that knowingness opens us up to greater possibilities of what can be. So that's why as we do our process of prayer, we go back into gratitude, because we've seen things being healed before. We've seen things have movement before, in spite of it seeming like it wouldn't. And I remember that even as an early age, some things that I was going through that I found quite difficult, I seemed to just intuitively come to an inner affirmation that was basically, what I'm going through now is not who I am, it's just what I'm going through. It's interesting how we can so associate ourselves with something that's difficult and think that it's us, or somehow inherently because we're not good enough on some level. Say it's just what we're going through. And so with so many things with right now, it is just really what we're going through. But the second part, which is so important, is to work on letting go and release. And in our philosophy, we have a special kind of letting go and release. Actually, there's multi-levels of it. So when we say we release something, or this prayer, or an affirmation, or a thought, or an intention, we say that we release it into spirit, we release it into the universe, we release it into what we say the law of mind. And it's a very specific type of releasing. And this is how it works. So I like the way that Deepak Chopra describes this. He says that everything we can see and not see is a field of infinite possibilities. That even in the depths of space that seems like a void, every square inch has immense potential energetically. And that when we affirm something or state something as an idea that we're going to embrace, that it activates that field of infinite possibilities, and we start some movement to happen in another way. And so when we say we release at the end of the prayer, what we're saying is that we're going to trust that we started a process, and we don't have to be the ones to always check back. You know, in classes I say that, would you go plant a seed in your garden and the next day go dig it up and say, are you going? Yes. So when I was thinking about releasing it, I have weird things that come in my mind. So I was thinking of this info commercial from the 90s, late 90s and early 2000s, that was on all the time. And I can't tell you many times I almost bought this thing. So I was fascinated by this chicken rotisserie. Do you know the commercial I'm talking about? Did you get close to buying it? Or maybe you did buy it. So anyways, the person, this info commercial guy, always had an audience, a live audience, and they were always drooling over the things that would go into the rotisserie. And he had the audience, trained to say his tagline. So once you throw the chicken in there, I wonder how many people know here what to say. Do you know what to say? You said it and you forget it. Yes. Do you know? Did you buy it? No, you didn't? Especially when they upgraded it to digital, I thought I was really going to buy it that time. I can't tell you how many times I had my credit card out. I didn't do it, though. But throughout this whole show, he would say, and set it and forget it. So that's how we think, in a sense, of prayer. You are setting it and kind of forgetting it. That you release your attachment to how it has to be. You release just having to check on it every other minute. That there's a certain part of you that trusts that it is working. And it is that the universe is conspiring to help you in some way. That we stop our obsessiveness about having it have to look into a certain way. And I think a good thing for us to remind ourselves is I think some of the best things that have happened in our lives are things that we could have never imagined the circumstances. That we had an idea of what we wanted to do, but it unfolded in an amazing way that we could have never come up with on our own. So, hi. So if you're wondering about your belief in your prayer system, think about roast chickens. You set it and you forget it. And you kind of let it go on its own to a certain bit. But there's two concepts here that can seem almost at odds. So we've got set it and forget it. And we also have a little saying within our prayer system here is that you pray and then you move your feet. So in other words, you just can't sit at home and wait for a delivery. That you actually have to do something about it. So how do we do this, set it and forget it, and pray and I have to do action and move my feet? I mean, does that seem kind of contrary? It's like I'm praying, so I have to run out of my house and do something today. Or do I do like the chicken thing? I just, dinner's in an hour or whatever it is. So there is this sweet spot for us to find. And this is where our spiritual practice comes in, which basically spiritual practice is about listening. So I don't know about you, but I have two voices in my head. I have a very loud ego voice that tells me to get out and do something right now. And I have a much quieter voice, which is more of that connective voice that tells the truth. Here's the difficult thing about this. My ego voice is very loud, and it's very insistent. And it says, you remember it said pray and move your feet? Go out right now. Go do something immediately. And sometimes you need to do that, but it is saying, sometimes it comes from anxiety. It's like, you have to make things happen. It's like, I had an employer years ago, they would say, I was in sales, other salespeople are going to eat your lunch. You need to go to those businesses right now. You need to get the orders before they do. It's like, and he would call like during the day, like, leave voicemails because it was pre-cell phone, but like, oh, don't, they're eating your lunch right now, John, go, go, go. And it's like, so there's that manic voice that is so insistent and that just wants you to go, but a spiritual practice is the art of slowly pushing that one aside and tuning into the other one. Now, the other one does tell you at certain points to take action. But it also tells you that there's times when that's just not right yet. That some of the most richest times that we have are when we are just being with something. That voice will start to intuitively guide you when it's time to go or when it's time to step out. That really the whole point of any spiritual practice is to put the other voice on hold. And I know that especially as we first begin a spiritual practice, it seems like we will never get past that voice. The really loud and insistent one. But just train yourself in a sense. So if there is something that in your life that you're seeking a solution and you are taking it to prayer, again, look at what messages you are getting. If there's something really loud and based in anxiety, that's probably not the one to listen to. If there's a quieter impulsion within you that's saying, go this direction, or let's just wait for a little bit, that's probably the one you need to listen to. And what I have found when you listen, train yourself to listen to that quieter voice, that it becomes more clear that that's the right direction. That the other voice becomes what it really is, just an annoyance. That the quiet voice even sometimes at a moment notice, will be, now it's time to go this way. It's time to do the other thing. And so I think that, in a sense, listening to that voice is really what is up for us right now as a spiritual community. Interesting, I think during this fall we did a lot of activity and great community service. And then in almost the last few weeks, we've been dealing with something, pretty deep for us. But as we've been talking with our prayer practitioners and leadership council, we are ready to go into a time of intense just asking, what's next? To not listen to that loud voice that says, well, you should be doing all this, but listening to that other voice that says, let's go into this direction. And you'll be having an invitation to participate. A couple big things. February 9th, we're going to have a brainstorming/visioning about a youth program. Our youth program kind of fell apart with the COVID. It's just kind of like, what do you do? But we know there will be a time in the not too distant future that it will be time to do that, but it takes some planning and some visioning and some brainstorming to set it up before. Like in our last phase of youth program, and it seems like we go through a bunch of kids, and they all get older, and then, no more kids anymore. It's like they're all close in age, and they're like, where did they go? And the last time, we did our visioning, and we hired a teacher, and there was knowing that there would be many Sundays that she would just sit. But it was like, that seemed to be the right thing, and it was the right thing. And it grew from there, but we went to the next thing. And then later on, that'll be February 9th, and there'll be more information about anyone who wants to be part of that. And then April, May, we're doing a larger visioning, brainstorming just about everything. What should we be up to? We've done some great things. Do we do more of it? Are there some other things that we can kind of be into in service? And those answers come through us. It comes through listening to that kind of quieter voice that's nudging us as opposed to the big voice that says, why aren't you doing this? Kind of thing. So that's why I actually feel really good about this year. We didn't get off to a great start, honestly, with some of the things that we've been having to experience. I still think it's a good year. And I know that as we all decide to be part of it, that the momentum will continue. So in a sense, we're in a mini, I think, quiet part. And I found an interesting little quote by someone, Jeff Goins, he's an author of a book called The In-Between. It says, embracing the tension between now and the next big thing is where it's all at. Sometimes there's just that moments of between the in-breath and the out-breath where you think, what's next? So that's where we are. So, next week I won't be here. The prayer practitioners will be here. I have set out shorts and polos for Palm Springs next week. Yes, I am actually going to a convention that just happens to be in the warm sun. Yeah, you say, well, where would you like our next conventions to be? And for me, it's like, I don't care, anywhere that it's warm. And I think when they had their first one in Miami and I was swimming in the ocean in February, it was like life-changing. But anyways, so with that, let's just embrace what's next. And let's just take it to prayer for right now. So, the divine is exactly where we are. As they say, there is not a spot where it is not. And we know that as we focus on that, there ultimately is really nothing else that we need to do. But in that openness, we say yes to that quiet voice that nudges us forward. That nudges us forward in the action that we need to take in the physical world. And we do so with great gratitude. We do so with great trust that we are being shown the way. And we release our attachment to how it has to unfold. We know that this life is a great mystery. And we allow ourselves to embrace it and allow it to embrace us. And so we just sit in thanks and we sit in trust. We open our hearts and our minds to the unlimited potential that is before us and say yes. And as we say yes, we follow Deepak Chopra's guidance and we release these words into the field of infinite possibilities. We know that we can set it and forget it. That thought, that intention has a life and energy of its own. And we'll honor it and let it be. So with that, we just say, and so it is.